And welcome back. Thank you all for joining me here for this wonderful regional weekend recap. This will be a little bit different than most of the other videos where the format is so structured, four legs, and we just have a conversation breakdown. But this one is just going to be really a discussion, a conversation about what took place. And in this specific video, we're going to recap the Eastern region. So I just kind of want to talk about the results because regionals is very different from when I was a student in college at Eastern Michigan. It used to be four regions, and there would be a regional champion. They had a number of qualifiers they could send for each event, and then they had I believe, an automatic standard. Now it's different. It's East and West Coast, and to go to regionals, you have to be in an individual event, one of the top 48. And from that top 48 of the region, you will have a first round and a second round. And from the first round, they whittle it down to 24. And from the second round, they whittle it down to 12. And so that 12 in each event for each region will go to the NCAA championships. And for the relay events, it's the top 24 that qualify, and there's only one round to compete. So a lot happened, but let's just talk about the Eastern region, and I kind of want to go with just day one. And so it's split up men first, so men were Wednesday and Friday, women were Thursday and Saturday. It should be similar when we go to the NCAA championships. They're no longer competing on the same day unless it's a multi event or even certain field events, depending on weather related issues. And in this discussion, I want to talk about the events that just the performances that stood out really. In the long jump on day one, I was actually really happy to see all those who qualified because we had some shockers going into the meet. One in the distance, Parker Wolf did not compete. He sustained an injury, and that was just devastating for me because I'm pretty sure, as you're aware on this channel, I'm a big fan of Parker Wolf. I think he is one of the best, talented distance runners in the country. So it was kind of a big blow to see him out. But we saw some big names in the long jump qualify, and like Malcolm Clemens from Florida, who's been dealing with injury. Like at Florida, who's not dealing with the injury? You've got so many injured athletes. You got the talent Greg Foster of Princeton, Jaden Keys of Georgia. So you had some big names make it, but you had some names that on the Eastern region that didn't make it. One name that stood out was Kaibon Tatham of Florida State. Not used to a Florida State guy not qualifying in the long jump. They normally send, one of the best. They're one of the best programs. They send a lot of guys. Jordan Turner of LSU didn't qualify. And so you had some big names miss out, but you also had some big names make it. And we'll talk about my opinions on the regional format when we're done with regional recaps. So probably in the second video when we talk about the Western region, I'll have an opinion, but I won't have one today. But that's the long jump, and that's how things kind of got started. Where I was just like, oh boy, here we go. The men's hammer, which was literally the very first event. You know, no real big shocker there, other than the fact that it looks like Tariq Robinson O'Hagan is really looking to double. And I don't say that to be sly or to be funny, like, oh, he's really taking it serious. He was always taking it serious, but I just kind of felt that the hammer wasn't his strength, the shot put was. But it's starting to look like maybe he can. Ole Miss sent four guys to nationals in the hammer throw. Four! You know, Tariq Robinson O'Hagan, Bryson Smith, Jake Dalton, and Mason Hickle, and only one of those guys is a senior. One. So, Connie Price Smith, at this point, is she the greatest throws coach ever? She's in the discussion. Let's at least settle on that. She is in the discussion. But back to Tariq. 244 feet 5 inches just to qualify because unlike previous regional competition, the goal is just to get there. It's not necessarily always to win. You just want to qualify, meet the qualifying standard in your field or your flight, and that's it. But that was a pretty solid mark right out the gate. It's like, man, this dude isn't playing. And then we get to the javelin, and then of course you got the Georgia guys. Mustafa Al Sharif continues to just chug along as one of the best javelin throwers, and it's like, oh my God, we're already starting with these great marks, and some of these guys didn't even look. They were just trying to qualify. Of course, they were given great effort, but some just was like, I just need to make sure I'm in the top 12. That's it. You had Lico Cabrera from Florida. You had Duval Diesel, who you'll see in a picture, obviously, on this platform. I did a brief recap of him at the ACC Championships a while ago. He's one of the top javelin throwers. The javelin, like, is going to shape up to be a great competition. And then we get started with the running events. And the hurdles, I would say the 110 hurdles kind of shocked me in one way. It's who didn't qualify out of the meet. Wednesday, the very first day, things kind of went well. Most of the big names made it to the second round. Um, Obviously, you had 24 athletes of the 48, half the field is going on. And then you come to Friday and you look at the top 12 that made it. Let's just name them: Jacoby Tharp of Auburn, Braxton Brand of Ohio State, Oscar Smith of Louisiana Tech, Ethan Exelholm of Northeastern, Bradley Franken of Sanford, Isaiah Taylor of North Carolina A&T, Matthew Sophia of LSU, Jaden Smith of Davidson, Damaris Waters of Florida, who's having a great outdoor season, by the way, Christopher Sorrell of Rutgers, Tyson Williams, of Florida State, and Jaheim Sturm of LSU. So, name that did make it that it's because he was DQ'd, was Andre Kortmacher of Florida State. He has been an outstanding hurdler for the Florida State Seminoles all year, and he is not going to the meet. You also have Sharvis Simmons of Clemson, Caleb Branch of Tennessee. Neither are going. Leonard Mustari of Florida A&M, they're a very talented hurdler. And he actually ran a pretty decent race, was in a tough heat, but his time wasn't going to hold up. 13.7, 13.6s, not going to cut it. The cutoff for this region was 13.56. Ugh, very tough, very tough, very deep field in the Eastern region. And it was similar in the men's 100. Of course, the big story coming out this weekend was Abdul Rashid Samino on the Eastern region. We know what happened in the Western region. We'll talk about Jordan Anthony in the next video. But in the Eastern region, Abdul Rashid Samino, and his time was when legal, 986. He was the national leader majority of the year. And he had a 987 that was slightly wind aided. The 986 that was not wind aided. That's a serious time because he's going to be a threat to be a finalist of the 100 meter, not just in the NCAA, but I think on the world stage, the world championships. The NCAA season can often take a toll on athletes, but it seems that, he's been kind of low key. He ran a lot early in the season and has kind of just been a relay guy until, conference championships, and now he's running really well. That 986 stands out, but he wasn't the only sub 10 guy in the region. Sola Ajayi of Auburn, and we've mentioned him here a lot on the channel, 995. And then you got the super freshman Jelani Watkins of LSU. Who says football players can't run fast? He can run fast. 10:01 is probably the fastest we've seen a football player run since Jeff Demps. But then we're reminded Jordan Anthony of Arkansas is also a football player. So they're having a great year, the football guys. We can't talk about them being slow no more. Tamaris McCullum qualifying, that didn't shock me. He's having a pretty good season. More so in the 200. And we'll talk about him in just a minute. But on the outside, that who did make it was young freshman from Florida, Jaden Wiley, 10-14 into a negative headwind. Brody Buffington of Georgia doesn't make it. Micah Larry of Georgia doesn't make it. Azim Fahmy of Auburn doesn't make it. You had some really big names, but the region is so stacked. This is the big challenge that you face. Unfortunately, those guys will not be going individually in the 100. And then let's jump into a distance event. We're not going to stick to the traditional format, so I'm going to move around a bit. And in the 1500, again, no Parker Wolf. Then my concern was, can Ethan get there? And Ethan, that's Ethan Strand of North Carolina. He does get there. He ran a 3:44.23 in his heat. He was, I think, heat two of the two heats was the slower heat. And unfortunately, the casualty is his teammate, Aiden Neal of North Carolina and Emity Kiplino. They run the eighth and ninth fastest time, but they were eighth and ninth in their heat. Um, Ethan Strand, Trent McFarland, Frank Kovacs, Liam Murphy, and Martin Sigurola. I hope I'm saying that right, of Indiana. That was Heat 2. They all ran slower times than Aiden and Emity, but they were one, two, three, four, and 5 in their heat, so they got the automatic qualifier to nationals. So unfortunate. And, sometimes it's the heat that you're in, but that's a really great thing for North Carolina. Although Aiden didn't make it, Ethan is in, and Ethan is, I think the guy we're all looking at. Now that we know that Parker is not in, and even though I think I'm one of the ones that did not expect Parker to run the mile, I was kind of expecting for him to run the 5K. But I mean, he could have. That Parker is an insanely talented distance runner, and he's a gamer. He's going to be a strong competitor in every race. Um, a noticeable story in the 1500 is although North Carolina didn't qualify two guys to nationals, University of Michigan did. They had three guys in this regional final race, and Trent McFarland will be going on, who's a sophomore, and Brandon Herger, who ran a better time than him, is a freshman. So the future looking bright for the Wolverines. Then you got Gary Martin. Thank God, 3:38.94. He's going, and I think it'll be between Gary and Ethan, as it has been all year long, to determine who's going to be the top 1500 guy, and that's not leaving out the Western guys. I'm aware of the Washington and Oregon guys running well, and we'll talk about that when we do our full preview next week. But in just this recap, just want to highlight it was great to see Gary Martin and Ethan both qualify. Didn't want to see any big names drop. And then in the steeple, I think this event is wide open regardless. There was no name that, made me go, oh, dang it, he didn't make it. Specifically out of this region, nothing really surprised me. I kind of was watching with like, I'm just curious to see what happens. And, Collins Kipnock of Kentucky, a freshman, had a facility record. How about that in your first regional competition? And Jeffrey Kerwa of Louisville, both freshmen, both qualifying the top two out of the region. And so I wonder if those are the names that we're going to be hearing about this event moving forward in the future, because there hasn't really been a solid favorite, at least for in my opinion, in this event in a while. It just hasn't. There hasn't been that guy. And so I wonder if it'll be one of those two. I'm looking more at Jeffrey Kerwa because I do believe he's number one in the country. So we'll see if that's the future in this event. We're waiting for that big time steeplechase star sort of solidify themselves in this event. And moving to, the women, we'll look at, some women sprinters. Jamesha Ford, I thought she was just going to be a 200 runner, and she's not. As we are aware, Jamisha is a well capable sprinter. She is a 200-meter specialist. Similar to that of Allison, she can run the 100 or 400 really, really well, and she proved that this season, being one of the top ranked 400 runners, the top ranked 200 runner, and one of the top ranked 100-meter runners. And she's going to go to nationals in the 100 and the 200. She had a great meet this weekend. We had a couple of eye-opening performances in the 100. You had Shanice Walker of Florida State, a young talented Jamaican, 10.98, win legal. We're going to be hearing that name. She's more than likely going to be representing Jamaica on the big stage. She guys lower that time. With Jamaica, it's 10.8 or better. Leah Bertrand of Ohio State, from Trinidad and Tobago, 10.99. I believe she's going to be the future there. And then a shocker for me was Anthea Charlton from Florida, 11:01, win legal. That is a school record for the Gators, and that does include her surpassing athletes like a Kyra Jefferson, who at one point held the NCAA record at 200 meters. That surpasses the great Grace Stark, and both of those athletes are from the great state of Michigan, by the way. And also that, surpasses Shayla Sanders. So for her to be number one, she's at the top of a pretty impressive group. You had Tima Godbless of LSU, who's been a real star for them this year, 10.9 also. So This was a great field. 11-2-4 didn't qualify though. And the person on the outside looking in went to Shamel Holmes, unfortunately, the freshman of Kentucky. She missed out Rain Redmond, of the freshman of Georgia, who was once a California state champion, but had some injuries, unfortunately, COVID, a number of things. So good to see her competing this season and back to it. But there was one outside of Shamel Holmes, there was one big name that didn't make it, and that was Iasia Wilson of UCF. She's also a great 200-meter runner, but sad to see her not qualify. And this, was a really tough region for women sprinters because there are, a lot of talent in this region. A shocker in the 200 was seeing the freshman Kelly Ufodiyama of East Carolina run a PR 22:54 to win her heat. She defeated Bertrand of Ohio State to qualify. Now, Ufodiyama has been mentioned on my channel before, obviously at the beginning of the indoor season. She was a standout freshman, and then she was kind of quiet. And I think part of that is because India Mayberry of TCU took over as the top freshman. But that type of mark at this point in the season, running a personal best, that's a huge standout for the young East Carolina Pirate. And not to speak bad of ECU, but she's at a smaller school. So does this mean she's going to be in the transfer portal moving on? My hope is not. I support the transfer portal when it works for the athlete's benefit, not necessarily just to uh, go to a big name. If that small school is working for you and developing you, I would encourage you to probably stay. I get the NIL money speaks, but you can get NIL money at a smaller school, in my opinion. The shocker in the 200 was that Kayla Jackson of Georgia did not compete in the 200. She didn't show, so she will only be competing in the 100. My hope is that it's not an injury. She had a slow start to her indoor season, and outdoors she's not been the same as she was last year. But Kayla is good at showing up at championship meets. So we'll see. She qualified to go to nationals. We'll wait until that official scratch report comes out next week. I think it'll come out probably, it may come out today, if not next week, Monday. But before we see it, we'll know what her health status is. And that was disappointing that she's not competing in the 200 because she is a great 200-meter runner. The 400 really didn't leave any shocks from the women's side or the men for me. Aaliyah Butler and Dejanay Oakley, top two. That says a lot about the Georgia Bulldogs and Coach Carol Smith Gilbert and her development there. No shock that things are working out well for her athletes. It took 51.94 to qualify from the Eastern region. I think the tougher of the two regions in this event, clearly, because that's it's a great field coming from the East. And then we look at the 800. No shock there on the women's side. Michaela Rose under 2 minutes, but now we had three athletes under 2 minutes in that region. Michaela Page of North Carolina, Gladys Chippengetich of Clemson, and of course Michaela Rose 158.91. I want to say that's either her second or third time under 159. She's having a much better outdoor season this year than I think last year, but we have to see how she performs on the national stage because she's yet to claim that national title, and her past couple of outings at the national championships have been disappointing. So we'll see. On the men's side in the 400, as I stated, no shock happened to me, none. I'm aware that Florida had five guys in that final race, and of those final guys, only one made it. It's been that type of year. I think, and this is just my personal opinion, the injuries really have hampered them, and I also think this is as a mental. It seems like a couple of guys have a mental block because a few of them underperformed this season, um, whereas last year it was the complete opposite. Some of them definitely overperformed. I'm pretty sure Coach Holloway is going to have a conversation with some of the guys and have them step up. But a name that, if I was to do a preview at the beginning of the outdoor season, I would have said, we got to keep an eye on him. He showed up. That Samuel Ghazi, the freshman, or excuse me, the sophomore at Alabama. He won it last year. He was a super freshman for Alabama, and he's been quiet all season long. And I'm not sure if it's been injury or if him just planning things Right, because we know that he's probably going to be a name that we mention at the World Championships this year. But he ran a personal best 44:43. He was the only 44 athlete in the entire region. That is an impressive mark. He's now the national leader. Well, no, excuse me, national runner up. Makai Danzy, who is the national leader of Florida State, the super freshman, was in a tough heat and had to fight to qualify, unfortunately. He finished third in his heat, but he was able to qualify. He's fifth overall in the region. Genoa McIver of Florida, who's coming back from a painful back strain, was able to qualify. It took a season best for him to get there, but that was his best race. The Georgia Bulldogs sent three guys, so Georgia's eating at Florida's 400 dominance. That's certainly for sure. And Coach Carol Smith Gilbert, what a year you're having! Just hats off to you and your staff because that is impressive. Multiple 400 runners for the men and multiple for the women, and having top tier 4x4s on each side. Um, Triple jump was an interesting story out of this region. We haven't heard on the from pretty much any of the big names from indoors. It's been kind of quiet, but we'll talk about some of the big names competing at the Western region. We do the Western region, but in the Eastern region, we did get Tatham of Florida State to qualify. We had one freshman in the entire field qualify, which was that's saying something. That's Jaden Lippett of Florida. Took a personal best for him to do that. Theophilus Mutsengereri of South Carolina was the top jumper. 53 feet 9 inches, so no major marks in the field events. The goals was just get there, just qualify. And then we had the men's 4x1, which was quite interesting because it's been Auburn and Tennessee pretty much all year long. And Tennessee set the track ablaze with that 38-20 at the SEC championships. And I thought, oh, well, they're the ones. And South Florida came along and said, not so fast, 38:05. If this was just a few years ago, that would have been almost a national record. We know now that we've had two teams go under 38 seconds, LSU and Florida. But South Florida is looking at that national record, and hats off to the coaching staff there because they're in the shadow of Florida, Florida State, and Miami, and they've had the best sprint year all year in the 100 and 200 of both programs. Some of that has to do with Florida not having Wanya McCoy, but doesn't matter. It's who do you have? Because no one has ever ran 986 at Florida. So South Florida has the top guy right now and the top squad right now, I think, in the state and in the region clearly. And now nationally, they're the number one in the 4x1. Auburn was second in that same heat. They were in the same heat, and Auburn couldn't hang. Tennessee did find a way to win their heat. The biggest, disappointment I think is that Clemson false started, so they didn't make it. Virginia Tech, no qualification, and curious to know what's going on with that squad. They had a number of big names not competing this weekend for Virginia Tech. So we'll see what's going on. I think that there's some injuries there. I think an impressive time was that of Tennessee 38-6-3 with, almost a half second lead on Ole Miss. So they ran that race pretty comfortably. And then we'll look at the 5K because that was an interesting story to see Wake Forest qualify three guys, and they're three in the top four of the whole region. And they were all in the same heat. So it really was a team effort on Wake Forest's part in the 5K just to trug along and dominate. Ethan Strand of North Carolina does qualify. Good to see that. The young sophomore from Michigan State, Riley Hose, kind of on the outside looking in. That was a disappointment. You also had Bernard Chiriot of Tulane not qualify. I think no major names missed it that made me go, oh, dang, other than the fact that we don't have Parker Wolf. I think that's the big name that just, it sucks that he's injured and we're not going to be able to see him, close out his career the way I think he should. That's, a real disappointment. But Rocky Hansen, the sophomore of Wake Forest, 13:36:54 in the 5K, pretty comfortable win for him. That's not even a personal best, so we'll see what he does. Moving over to the women's side, in the women's 10K, things got interesting. Good to see Hilda Olamomoy of Florida qualify season best. She's been so up and down, you know, during her Florida career. Grace Hartman, what a season she's having. Setting a facility record in the 10K, 32, 32, 80. She also qualified in the 5K as top in the region. Met her, obviously, the pin relays. I shared that with you guys in the elevator, of all places. She's a very talented distance runner, and I think it's time that we give more credence to the coaching at NC State. They've got another great distance runner. They didn't go anywhere. They just had a graduation of Caitlin Tui and a bunch of others who graduated and moved on, and some went pro early. And so we thought, oh, they're done. No, they're not. It's still great coaching there at NC State. It is still working. For them to have an athlete like Grace Hartman performing times like that, come on. What an outstanding mark by her. And then the men's 10K, yeah, we had Victor Kiprock of Alabama. Happy to see him qualify. Really happy to see him qualify. I think the big name not to make it was Mario Prego of Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky, quietly one of the better distance programs in the small level. Um, and then we saw Will Anthony of Virginia. He did not finish. And neither did Nicholas Kipchurcher of Virginia Tech. So some disappointments there. But no major shocks. In the men's pole vault, I was very happy to see my guy, Hunter Garrettson of Akron. Come on, Matt guy. He qualified. Again, the goal is just to qualify when it's a field event, just be on the top 12. And almost out, but found a way to end up six overall was Seaman Guterson of Duke. And I know that because of that name, he's going to be one of the favorites, but when I do my preview video, I think I'm going to have a different name. Just as a heads up, letting everybody know now. And then we'll talk about the 4x4s here and kind of close out the video. The men's 4x4 was, kind of eye opening because South Florida tied Florida's, number one time 3:01:52. And Florida comfortably won their heat 3:02:01 off the backs of their anchor, Genoa McIver. His split as the anchor was 44:39, so he had to walk down Alabama. Um, I, I'm almost positive this race will be a sub 3 minute race when it comes to nationals, and we'll probably see the best performances we've seen all year from these groups. But South Florida walking away is probably the top sprint program out of the Eastern region was not on my bingo card, but they've earned that. The top guy in the 100, a top 4x1, 4x4 squad. They've had a multiple in both the 1, the 2, and the 4 qualify. Great year for South Florida. Hats off to them. 3:02:01 for second for Florida. On the women's side, Georgia came out the champion. 3:25:08. They broke the facility record that Florida held way back in 2021. And ironically, they were the only school under that time. South Carolina ran 3:27:56. Tennessee 3:27:76. It amazes me now how many teams run sub 3:28 during the regular season. There were four in this region alone: Duke, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Georgia, that all qualified. Harvard was able to sneak in there. So was LSU, the Wolverines of Michigan. But on the outside, no Howard Bison. Sucks for David Oliver's squad. Purdue not making it. UCF not making it despite having seasonal bests. And they had such a strong indoor season. Clearly, some of the injuries interfered. Virginia Tech was disqualified. This was a tough meet for the Hokies of Virginia Tech because, man, did some things go wrong. And then we're also looking at the outside looking in. Surprisingly, uh, South Florida on the women's side, 3:32:19 was not enough. You had to run 3:30. That was the only team that ran 3:30 that qualified. The other 11 all ran under 3:30. That is how tough the Eastern region was for the women. And we'll leave things here for now. Again, you had runners like T. Mars McCullum run a great 200. You saw it at the beginning of the video. This was a really, really tough region. And again, as this was just a discussion, we'll talk about the Western region in our next video. When we do this preview breakdown, this is going to be tough for me and I think for all of us because this is probably to me the deepest and most competitive field I think we've seen in a couple of years. I think we are fully transitioned away from COVID. I think COVID did affect 2021, 2022, and 2023. 2024, I think we saw great performances because there had been people that had been there 5, 6 years. This year, to me, feels like the first year we're free from COVID fully. And I thought we would have, some steps back. We don't. These were some great performances this past weekend from the Eastern region. And so, thanks for listening. This will close things out here. Next video, we'll do the Western region. That'll come out tomorrow, and we'll discuss some things there. And then we'll do our full preview. So, thanks for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. I know there's obviously some events that I missed, but I would rather hear your opinions on those and we can discuss. But keep things on this video to the Eastern region, as I know that we'll have a lot to say when it comes to the Western region. Thanks again, guys, for your support.